Hi, third grade. You may have already seen lesson 116 as an instructional video. So I am re-recording lesson 116 because I made a huge error in the video. Teachers make mistakes, and I told you about one concept, least common multiple, and then when I did an example, I looked for the product of two numbers instead of looking for the least common multiple like I told you guys to do. And that was because I was trying to get through so many videos all at once in one sitting and got distracted. And so now I'm going to record this video again and hopefully fix some of those errors so that you don't get confused when you're trying to work on your worksheet. So lesson 116 is on common denominators. And the objective is rename fractions whose denominators are not equal by using a common denominator of the fractions. And that's where we're going to be mostly concentrating, is how do we find the denominator that we need to change these to. I'm going to just close this window. Sun is shining in a little bit too bright. It was hard to read the whiteboard. So your worksheet, I'm going to cover it because I already put the answers on the bottom to make it into a key for correcting your work. It says common denominators. To rename fractions so that they have a common denominator, first look down the multiplication table column for each denominator, then find the smallest number both columns share and rename using the loop method. And I'm going to show you also another example that you could, another way that you could convert the fractions, because I did not originally learn this with loop method when I was learning how to find common denominators. So we're going to go through an example on the top of your worksheet, and then I'm going to go through another one. So the example that they give you is 3/4 and 4/5. I'm going to teach you a vocab word. This is where I got confused when I was doing examples. We heard about GCF last week, greatest common factor, when we're trying to reduce fractions. Another abbreviation that we use with fractions is LCM, or least common multiple. They also call it lowest common denominator on your worksheet. But we have GCF, we have LCM. LCM is least common multiple. And that's what we're looking for to figure out what our new denominator is going to be. It's going to be the least common multiple of 4 and 5. So remember, a multiple is just a number that you get when you multiply. It's every number that the multiples of 4 are every number that 4 is a factor of. When you multiply 4 by something, you get a multiple of 4. Same thing with 5. Any number that 5 is a factor of is a multiple of 5, because when you multiply 5 by another number, you get that multiple. So they say to use your multiplication chart, and you can use a multiplication chart. You can go horizontally or you can go vertically. That's fine. But I'm going to look down my 4s line. I'm going to look down the row. I'm going to look 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, 36, 40, 44, 48. Then I'm going to look down 5s, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60. The smallest number that appears in both rows is 20. So that's the least common multiple, the smallest number that is a multiple of both 4 and 5. Coincidentally, it's also the product of 4 and 5, but that isn't always the case. That's specifically where I messed up on the first video. So 20 is the least common multiple. So 20 is the denominator that I am looking for both of these problems. Now I'm going to use two different methods to convert these fractions. I'm going to use the loop method on the top because that's how your worksheet tells you to do it. And then I'm going to show you another way that I learned it when I was learning common denominators. You can use either strategy. It depends on how your brain works. So using the loop method, I'm going to circle the denominator in my unknown fraction and the numerator in my known fraction. When we're using loop method, when we're going to cross multiply and divide, we always go diagonally. So I'm going to go 3 times 20. I can look at the 3 and the 2 is 6 and the 0 on the end. So 3 times 20 is 60. Now I need to divide that by 4 because my denominator in my known fraction becomes my divisor. 4 can go into 6 one time. 4 can go into 20 5 times. So 15 is my numerator in my unknown fraction. 3/4 is equivalent to 15/20. Now, another way that you can do this, once you figure out what that least common multiple is, once you know what the lowest common denominator is, what you're looking for, you don't need to do loop method. Loop method will always work, but I could look at 5 and 20 and say, what did I need to do to that 5 in order to turn it into a 20? And this is kind of like our lesson with greatest common factor from last week. Once we found the greatest common factor and we knew what we needed to divide by, we had to divide the numerator and the denominator by the same number. So when I know what I needed to multiply 5 by to get 20, I need to multiply the numerator by the same exact number. So 5, I needed to multiply that by a 4 in order to turn it into a 20. So I'm going to multiply my 4 by a 4 as well. 4 times 4 is 16. 4/5 is equivalent to 16/20. Now, sometimes, depending on how fluent you are with your fact families, this might be quicker if you have your facts memorized than doing the loop method and multiplying and then dividing. It might be easier for you to figure out what that relationship is and just have to multiply. Either way, you will get the same answer. It's also a great idea if you're not super confident with your fact fluency. You could say, hey, yeah, I did that now to figure out what that numerator is, but I want to check my work. We could cross multiply and say 4 times 20 is 80 and divide that by 5. 5 goes into 8 one time. 5 goes into 36 times. If I got the same answer, then I know that I did it correctly. We're going to try another one. We are going to try 1/6 and 3/4. So I want to look for the least common multiple of 6 and 4. So I could look at my multiplication chart, or I could be thinking about my number rows in my head. So I could be thinking, what are the number rows of 4? If I'm doing my number rows, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. And then I could be thinking about my multiples of 6, 6, 12, 18, 24. So I have 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. And then here I have 6, 12, 18, 24. 24 appears in both of them. However, so does 12, and that's smaller. That's my least common multiple. 24 is a common multiple, but 12 is my least common multiple. So 12 is the denominator that I'm going to be looking for. So I could cross multiply and divide. Identity property makes that super easy. 12 times 1 is 12. 12 divided by 6 equals 2. So 1/6 is equivalent to 2/12. 3/4, 12. I'm going to use my other method. I'm going to say, hey, what did I have to do to 4 to change it into a 12? I had to multiply it by 3, which means I need to multiply the numerator also by 3. 3 times 3 is 9. 3/4 is equivalent to 9/12. Right now on your worksheet, the only thing that you're going to have to do is to look at two different fractions and convert them so that they have a common denominator. Later on, we're going to use this skill because now that they have a common denominator, I can add or subtract or do other things with those fractions because they have a common denominator. You guys are really good at adding and subtracting when there's a common denominator because we know the denominator is not going to change them. I only have to worry about my numerator. If they don't have a common denominator, I need to make them have a common denominator first before I can do that adding and subtracting. So this lesson covers how to do that. Sometimes your number might already be the lowest common denominator. What if this was, instead of 3/4, what if this was 2/3? The lowest common denominator of 1/6 and 2/3 is 6. That one would not need to convert at all. So you also need to watch out for that fact. Because remember, when we're going down a number chart, if I'm going down my 6's, 6 is a multiple of 6. 6 times 1 is 6. So keep that in mind too while you're going through this lesson. Hint, hint, you might see that on one of your problems.